Hello and welcome to the Sociology Staffroom. I'm Katie Tyler and we've got Nusrath with us today. So hello and welcome first of all.
Hi everyone.
Amazing. So we're going to be talking about synoptic links today, which is something that I feel passionate about. I know that lots of our listeners and people who use the Facebook page are, and I really want to delve into that. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about yourself first of all, so we get a bit of context to where
Um,
you're from.
I've done my degree in sociology and then I did my teacher training and I've been teaching sociology since 2011. And at my current school, I've been here since 2016. I'm a one-person department. Um, yeah, and I teach like year 12s and year 13s. Um, A-level sociology. I'm hoping to introduce GCSE sociology at our school. Yeah, that's about it. I teach out. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the school's name, but it's kind of like featured on the Times education kind of list for one of like the good schools in London. The Cooper's Company and Coburn School. And it's kind of got a lot of history in terms of like celebrities that have come here, or our school's always one of the schools that are interviewed by the media or
Mm.
anything. I think it's because if you kind of put it into the context of sociology, kind of like a middle class school and a very good area does really well, kind of like typical characteristics of what would they read in the textbook about
Oh.
a good school.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I don't know why, but I feel like I should know this. And maybe like Duncan's like, because he's recording right now and he's like, well, how do you not know this school? Like, but I would definitely Google it and find out more. I don't know how I've missed that. So apologies for not knowing the school. I know we did have a
That's
conversation
okay.
about the school. So,
So if
but
you go on
yes.
the yeah, like school website, they put the Times paper in a headline about our
Mm-hmm.
school, which I always teach my students about marketing the school and marketization,
Marketisation,
and
yeah.
apply everything to the school environment and how do we recruit students and how do we sell ourselves.
Oh, I feel like it's a conversation in itself, isn't it? A separate
Yeah,
conversation about how schools successfully market themselves as
yeah.
well. So that would be quite an interesting conversation to have. And also another conversation, like as well, about the sort of teaching different cohorts of students as well. So I'm only tapping you up again for further conversations. But today we're talking about synoptic links. So first of all, I know you hear this word, and I remember we just had a conversation before we came on. We were saying like I sometimes refer to it as synopticity, and I think we googled it and it was synoptic links, but we've gone for synoptic links. And sociology, I don't know if you find this, and I know that's why we're talking about this today. Is I don't know if it's very synoptic. Obviously, it's highly synoptic as a topic, and I almost feel like the year 13 feels easier than year 12 because it's building on existing knowledge rather than I know with other
Sorry.
subjects you must do. I don't know. I can't think of another subject off the top of my head, but you might do that topic in, say, geography, or I know they've got a synoptic link in there, but a topic, and then you don't really revisit again in another topic or another topic or another topic. And whereas sociology isn't like that. So first of all, what do you think is the relevance of synopticity or being synoptic in sociology in your teaching?
I think it because if you look at society, everything in society is
Mm,
interconnected. You can't assume to study a topic and not make connections between
mm,
topics or within topic areas. Um,
mm,
and I think it's really important for students to see that connection because society is very interconnected. It kind of links to that sociological imagination concept, isn't
mm.
it?
Yeah.
You can't look at something in isolation, look at the wider context of it. So it kind of gives you the wider context of things. I think it is something that's very hard to teach because textbooks don't really teach it
Mm,
because it's a skill. And so I do find like students find it hard to grasp it. I think it's a lot easier
mm.
in year 13 than it is in year 12. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
definitely. It feels like there's some faith on the students' part in year 12, isn't there? That don't worry, it's all going to come together. I feel like when we start the year 12 topic, and then a lot of us would have already started midway through maybe the education unit
Sorry.
or have started education, depending on how they split it. Don't worry, I had a cold, literally. I had the longest cold and cough for like 2, 3 weeks. So I'm on the other end of it. But yeah, I think for the students in year 12, it's sort of one of those things you think, oh my goodness, how is it all going to pull together at the end? And then almost it's the sort of the penny drops. I don't know, maybe sort of February to August time in year 12, and then obviously it's cemented into year 13. But like you said, it is quite a hard thing to teach, and obviously sociology is hugely synoptic because it links to wider society, and there are threads that run through the whole course.
It
So
definitely
how
does, yeah.
go for it. So how do
Because
you go
now how
about
like
teaching it?
if you look at the spec, it talks about integral and
Mm,
core themes or elements. So what I
mm,
do in year 12 is I do like the first 2, 3 weeks introductory lessons. I
mm-hmm,
turn each of those bullet points into a core theme, and I call it core theme one. And I look at like key sociological concepts like socialization, norms, values. Then I do core theme two, like sociological theories, and I do it in a very basic, simple way. I give them like I actually use a lot of the resources that you guys have, and you've got like a poster page for each of the theories,
mm-hmm,
and then I print that off and I give them an analogy. And the human body for functionalism, Marxism, like a league table or some kind of hierarchy. And I kind of use as analogies for them to kind of get a basic understanding of each of the theory. Core theme three, I call it Sega. I know you guys call it Dr. Cages, I think, but I call it social
mm,
class, ethnicity, gender, and age. Sega, I don't know why. So everybody has got their
mm-hmm.
own version of it. But we look
Yeah.
at like social differentiation and stratification. That's core theme three. Core theme four I do is research methods. I give them like a basic introduction to positivism and interpretivism. And I think for me, core theme five, I make it about globalization. And because I do those introductory themes and core themes, I then interweave them into my lessons. And so by the time they get to year 12, before they transition to year 13, I create like a summer homework for them. And so I create a grid and a couple of grids, and I do like a grid for family and households with all the topics on the top and all the topics on the side. And they have to kind of come up with three synoptic links between the different topic areas. I do the same with education. And then I do a grid with the core themes, and that really helps them. So I give them a target like minimum you have to put one link between each of the boxes, and I give them a head start, maximum do three. And I say to them the reason why I'm making you do that because it ends up being a revision tool they can refer to.
Mm,
It sits with some papers more easily than others. Like theory and method, they now understand as year 13 students why might the examiners might have put theory and methods between two papers. Because if you look at theory and methods, it's the core debates, the method, the core theories that is a foundational basis of what sociology is, isn't it? And I think whoever designed the specification must have thought, let's put it between two papers because it brings it together.
mm-hmm,
In year 12, it's really hard to explain that to them. They just think, oh, they're I don't understand is why is it between two papers? I think as you said, students they do. And I think theory and methods, I kind of see it as a revision unit because
mm,
every time you teach them something about it, they know something about it already because they know what they can apply from year 12. And then the year 13 is further examples they can use. So I think theory and method really lends itself well. Education and crime. I think the hardest one is paper two because the nature of the 10 markers are different. I
mm-hmm,
think they've grasped that it's cause and effect, but they've also grasped that it's very hard to predict what the combinations are going to be. They can't predict that. The best way to practice that is, and I think it's from the 2 to 2 workbooks. I think for it's the activity I adapt always. And I think a lot
mm,
of you might, actually, you guys might say it's a revision workbook. I actually see it as saving my lessons
mm-hmm,
because I use it as worksheets and I adapt it and I can think of other ideas to kind of make it more adaptable to my students. So I think it's from the Family Houses booklet. It's the one about couples, and then it's got like couples in the middle, and then it has all the different like synoptic links. And the red line means is that the cause of because of couples or is it an effect? And I think that activity really works well because one of the advice I give to my students, preparing for beliefs or family and houses, that's the best way you can revise for it. So the 10 markers and paper two are very unique because the 10 marker without an item, with an item, it's cause and effect. I think they've seen a pattern with that, and they can draw on two areas of this. 2 areas of family house, so let's say, or beliefs, or the other options that you might study. And it's very hard, you can't really prepare for what kind of two things they might pair up together. I think the 2 to 2 workbooks really help them to think really deeply about what the connections between the topic areas are. And some of the topic areas are a lot easier to do.
mm-hmm,
But demography, like, thank God it's a 20 marker from this summer's exam, but I think that's the one they found the hardest to do, especially not birth rates because they can link birth rates to everything. I think the one they found really hard was migration. And examiners are becoming very
mm,
creative now with the combinations they're coming up with, and the combinations are going to get much more unique now. And unfortunately, like the textbooks don't really address the skills part, and they're not going to deal with every possible connections, can they? You have to kind of prepare your students to kind of think
Mm,
outside the box. They can link it to like contemporary studies or what they're watching the news or general discussions in class. And I think those questions are kind of used, I think, to differentiate between students, because they kind of make students panic, don't they? Either some students break down the course, some students break down the effect, but a lot of students don't really bring them together, and make the connections between them. They kind of treat them separately as separate topic areas. I think that's the one where the synoptic links is um, obvious in the exam question, but harder to teach for some
mm,
topic areas, not all of it. Like the demography, I struggle with that. I know a lot of people struggle with beliefs in society, but I actually like teaching it. Um, and I think it was like on the sociology Facebook book comment yesterday that beliefs in society, like every topic links with another. How do you break it down? And I think like if when we do like the theories of religion, functionalism, I try to use examples from the other chapters and introduce them to the examples beforehand. So when they look at the example in a different topic here, they're like, "Oh, I've come across that before."
mm.
Like for instance, the ultra nationalism in India and Nanda's study. I think students want counted how many times we've used it. Means we've used it 5, 6 times already, and I tell them, "Yep, I tell them it makes a revision a lot easier because you can use one study in many different ways in many different questions." So it's not really overwhelming because sociology is very content heavy. So you kind of have to make very kind of conscious selection of studies that you focus on that you can use in multiple different topic areas. And I tend to weave that in very early on and kind of inspired by the 2 to 2 workbook. I think for the functions theory, it says how does it apply to those kind of other contemporary examples that are from the other chapters. And I kind of link it in very early. So when we do learn something new, they already have a prior knowledge, don't they? Which they kind of
Mhm.
build on and reinforce. There's lots of benefits to like synoptic links. I think it improved their responses too. Like when they're stuck on an essay, they don't know what else to write. What can they bring in that's synoptic?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I find, like you said, I think it's those things that it builds up, and I think you said like you do this great activity at the end of the year 12 where you sort of get almost like a big A3 grid by the sounds of it, and you get the students to make links between the topics. So, for
Yeah,
example, like you just said, demography and say uh, childhood or something like that,
yeah,
and then and I think that's that's like you said, it's something you can practice that way, and it's not only revision, but it's also developing that skill as well. And then obviously against those synoptic links like socialization and looking at
the
theories
core
across
themes.
and
Yeah,
the core themes, policies, that type of thing. And I think that sort of idea of practice is really, really important. And then another important thing you've just mentioned is really thinking about the selection of those names and those studies. Like that sounds like a really sort of, like you've mentioned, that some names you might look at more than once across a topic, but also in other topics. Like and it's saying to the students, actually, you haven't got lots more to revise. Actually, you've got very not much to really to revise, in the sense that it's just revising the same thing, but with a lot more detail across
yeah.
that. At what point do you find your students sort of the penny drop in regards to that? Because I feel like maybe for the year 12, like you said, I think it's a bit of a shock. You're like, oh my goodness, I've got to learn all these names and all
Yeah,
these studies and all these theories. But little do they know that actually there's a lot of repetition in that.
yeah.
When does the penny drop for your students?
I think
Generally.
I think at the moment that they start because I did the core themes and I did that introduction, they're starting to weave that in themselves. The ones that
Hmm.
are making that connection. For ones that is not obvious, you kind of like kind of put it in a part of your starter activity, like a reflective
Mm.
task, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, or stretch and challenge question, or kind of in your discussions in class, and it's like continuously reinforcing that. Because I always tell them year 12 content. Well, it's my perception. I can't speak for anyone else, but I think when you've got 3 papers to do at the end of your 2 years, you need to make year 12 content strongest. Your strongest. So education, is like typically performed really well at our school. Family houses they surprisingly do well on. The one they struggle one is with Billy's. It kind of makes sense because they kind of do it before their exams. So I always tell them that going over things that you've done in year 12 is helping you in year 13,
Hmm.
and
Definitely.
it's just reinforcing. It's a revision tool. I hate the idea of flashcards. It's just not me. My
Hmm.
kind of revision, inspired by the workbooks, is based on application and
Yeah.
skill-based revision. And I think when you kind of do different tasks or however you choose to do it in your lessons, it allows them to kind of stimulate them, doesn't it? and to apply
Yeah.
what they know, and it becomes part of the long-term memory. So I think it's a very hard one to kind of like first introduce them to it, and then teach them to it. But I mean, like they can't. They're starting to do it now. They recognize the links between. I mean, at the moment we're doing ethnicity and achievement, and we looked at material factors today, and they're like, Miss, could we use the material factors we looked at in class? I said, yes, you can. There's not anything from. There's not a different set of sociologists for material factor. The name in the Napier Press is Palmer, but
Mm,
for class and achievement, they have a lot of different sociologies. I'm saying yes, you can use that because if you're an
mm,
ethnic minority from a low income background, you're going to experience the same thing. Are you not in terms of like lack of financial resources? So they're kind of starting to make those link themselves. They can see
mm-hmm,
that. Um, I don't think all students grasp it in the same way. I think
mm-hmm,
some students see it as it's an optional for students that they think are going to do so well in the exam, and I tell them
mm,
it's not an option; it's for everyone to do that. And I
mm.
think a lot of students find it hard to do that because it's trying to make those invisible lines visible, isn't it?
Definitely, that's such an important thing. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So I thought it's like you said. I think sometimes like that question, I have that quite a lot as well. And I'm sure lots of other teachers do. Is am I allowed to use that name across? And you're like, well, you can. Obviously, they don't know that, the students, unless they've been told, because they think, oh well, I've seen that name in education, for argument's sake. Can I use that name in crime? And you're like, yeah, actually, you probably could answer a solid education paper without a sort of crime paper with some of the education stuff or the
yeah.
stuff you've maybe looked in
Like
family and
Cohen's
household.
status frustration, for instance, and the
Mm,
Nike identity with Archer. The only danger with that is when they're applying that study from or anything from education, they need to still make it sound about crime
mm,
and not education. And it's
mm,
that's another like another kind of like a podcast like session to do about teaching analytical
mm.
skills
Yeah,
because that
definitely.
skill is very hard to teach, isn't it? Where you're trying to stop them from regurgitating
Yes,
and actually apply that synoptic link and
yes,
practice
definitely.
that. That's another like skill set itself.
Definitely. I think you get that sort of gap. And I find that, I don't know if you, I know we talk about synopticity, but I find that gap quite transparent actually in the 4 and the 6 markers. I don't know if you feel the same, where the students will identify the way as such, or the reason, or whatever they're like, identify the 2 and the 4 markers. Um, and then they don't actually explain how that has an impact. They're not really doing the application. Sometimes it falls into a description rather than
Than an
like,
application.
an application. So yeah, definitely application is something they need to. That's definitely an area to talk about, because actually, especially like that cause and effect you said, or whether you've got those synoptic skills, some students treat that as two separate questions. So we'll
Mm.
obviously like say birth
Two
rate and
separate topic areas.
yeah,
Even
and family diversity or something. Yeah, rather
even if
than
you look at
saying how they impact on each other.
even if you look at education and if you look at class ethnicity gender, and I'm not making this example up, the exam question they got for their real exams in the summer 30 marker was very similar to my made up question for their mocks because their
Mm,
30 marker at achievement was on all social groups. And
mm,
what I try to do with my students is, yes, I use past exam questions, but I
mm,
have to have that self belief that they are going to try and create and be creative, the examiner. They are trying to, and their mock exam question I gave them for education was on social groups. And they're like, Miss, how did
mm,
you know that? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to think of other ways they're going to make the questions more synoptic, more question based, applied what they know. And if you look at achievement, like the textbook focus on the achievement or underachievement or achievement, but they don't realize it's also talking about their experience with school and their
yes.
identity in school. So I always say to them, when it comes to like class, ethnicity, gender, they might ask you a question on achievement, they might ask you a question on identity, they might ask you a question
Mm,
on the experience of school. And I think the 2 to 2 workbooks has helped with that. Try to make connections between different things they're learning about in education. Because
mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if the examiners were inspired by the workbooks because I feel like the questions have
I
become
don't
much more.
know.
Well, that's my personal opinion, but I feel like with the social groups and achievement one, it sounded very inspired, maybe perhaps because my students didn't think that was possible. That they could not just focus on one group; they can focus on all 3 groups, and they
Mm-hmm.
did. And it was very similar to what I asked them in their internal mock exams. That's what I'm noticing with the questions as well. Like paper 2, we know is uniquely very like explicitly synoptic, but it
Mm-hmm.
features in paper 1 and paper 3 too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if we look at, they might in the future, let's say, because they've asked a question on ethnicity, gender, and class and crime, they might focus on social groups. So when so at the moment I'm teaching the this week ethnicity and crime, but we kind of touched on gender and class. And they could do that because so you have to kind of build in a synoptic between topics and within topic areas, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the best way I kind of tell them that is the reason why it really works is because it gives a responses they give in the exam, like a nuanced response, like a wider, like a bigger picture, and instead of someone who's regurgitated the textbook, or when students sometimes, unfortunately, write the essay in the order in the paragraphs that appear in the textbook. I hate that. And I think the more early you build it in and you kind of reinforce it, it becomes part of the natural practice.
Definitely, yeah, and I think it's that sort of, like you said, that reinforcement. Maybe at the beginning of the lesson, it might be part of a starter activity. It might be a case that you sort of like once you've taught a whole unit, is pull it all together. I know for
Yeah,
my person, I know it's hard for teachers to do this, but I try and teach. Do a lot of flip learning, so that it allows for those synoptic links in the lesson, and I do try to finish teaching quite early on in the year, not early, like not now, but enough time to allow for that revision, so that students can pull things across between
yeah.
all the topics. But
Because
I know it's hard because it's quite content heavy. But like you said, a lot of those names will repeat itself again and again.
it does. One of the things our school does is they have like sociology captains and subject mentors. And I start my revision in September, week one. And we do like a half an hour session. And then I lead the first two sessions, and I get my captains and my mentors to lead
Oh
the
wow, that's a
session.
brilliant idea.
And they kind of
Yeah.
put a workbook together, like the two to two guys, like you guys do in the workbooks. And one of the tasks, or two of the tasks, is always a synoptic links task, which then everybody
Amazing.
gets, so they lead the session, and there's a copy of it at the school Google Classroom, and they get a hard copy as well. So I do revision from September, I build it in, and then the time increases before their internal mock exams, which is after Christmas. I'm a one-person department, and it's like I last year I managed to have 4 weeks of revision.
Amazing.
This
So,
year I don't know, but it's really hard, isn't it? Because I'm
mm,
jumping through different topics every week. And one of my classic tasks is to kind of make links between them every time. So I say to them, every time we do a new topic, you're linking it back to the previous couple of weeks as
mm.
well. And reinforcing that again and again and again. We've finished theories of crime, we've done class and crime, we're on ethnicity and crime. And they're like, Miss, why are we still learning about theories of crime? Well, I said to them, it applies, it applies.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
It
Those sort of
applies
common threads.
massively. It applies massively, and I think it massively helps them in their exams when they're stuck for another point or another counter. It really helps. And I think another thing that workbook does is a scale one, the evaluation. And I think that's really improved their evaluation skills because they always used to think, oh, however, on the other hand. By putting strength in there, if you've got synoptic links between different topic areas, that's showing the relevance of that sociologist's work. I tell them something like Bourdois, I say Bourdois, I don't know how I pronounce Bourdois' name. But Bourdois' works have been followed by many other sociologists, Diane Ray study, um, Ethnic Capital by that new sociologist, as an Asian sociologist, Bhopal. Ethnic capital, and if someone's work is being respected and applied in other subject areas or topic area, that's a strength of that person's work, isn't it? Or the
Of
relevance of
course.
that synoptic so I think synoptic links helps with that scale thing, like strength, criticism, an alternative way of looking at something. So it develops their evaluation skills, analytical skills. um
Amazing.
yeah, it's such an important skill to have. I think it's
Oh,
just
definitely. I think it's almost like you said. I think it starts from day one, and I know like we're already sort of 7 weeks, 8 weeks into the academic year. But actually, if you can build in that synopticity straight off, I know that there's a lot of debate. Do people do an introduction? Do they not do an introduction into, or do we start straight with education? But I suppose the benefit of doing that is setting that foundation, those synoptic links, and the student. Like I know
yeah,
what you're saying. Like the students go, oh, we're looking at functions and marks, and I mean again, or for example, like obviously cage debates as well. They constantly come
yeah.
through, or globalization and
Globalization,
policies.
socialization, norms and
Yeah,
values.
yeah.
One of
And
like
actually,
one
they sort of
Yeah,
go, oh, actually, I probably could write this course before. Like you said about your students or your
yeah,
captains. They sort of go, you can almost predict even before you teach beliefs that they know what's going to be covered. You could actually almost say to
yeah.
your students, right, we haven't taught the start beliefs, but this is our first lesson. What do you think we're going to cover before we even start the lesson? And they
So
probably
it's
predict
theories
it.
of, yeah. So they
Yeah.
kind of predict. So one of the things I get my year 12s to do after I do like the introductions to the core themes,
Mm,
they do a presentation where they pick a social issue that matters to them
mm,
and something that they're passionate about, and they kind of do like a why they pick that topic, how does it link to the themes that we've studied in
mm,
introduction, how would they research it. So I get them to be a working sociologist from day one.
mm,
So like some of the topic areas I've had is like colorism to police racism to does prisons work, and when they're talking about it, they're kind of doing a mini application for EPQ,
mm,
that, and they kind of look, and then within that we can see what themes they reference to. If they do like gender pay gap, you can see reference to like feminism, you can see reference to the feminist theory, um
mm,
and so I get them to do that project, and it's called a social issue that matters to you, and it's a nice way of learning about them as well. What
mm. So when do you do that
and
again, sorry?
after I do all the core themes, and I get them to do a
Mm,
presentation, and I give them like a
nice.
week to prepare for it. So they do like a two-slide presentation, then they do a report, which is an extension of that. How did they decided
I'm
to?
writing
What
that
topic did they
down.
pick? What topic they picked? Why did they pick it? How does it link to the core themes? I give them a target. It has to link to certain core themes, and then I give
Mm,
them an option. How would they research it? You'd be surprised how much they know about research method. Obviously, the most two typical methods they refer to very early on, without having to do sociologist questionnaires and interviews.
yeah.
But they're able to kind of come up with examples of questions they would ask and why.
It's quite a
And
nice
what
revision
would
activity, isn't it?
Yeah,
Quite,
it's
and
a
that
revision.
application.
And I keep a
Yeah.
copy of it. And I kind of like show it to other students too. I had really, really interesting one. One of the ones that really stood out for me was a student that did about forgotten immigrants during the pandemic.
Mm,
And you would have thought it wasn't a year 12 student delivering it. Like the way the student delivered it, it was like they were making an application for EPQ, or they were
mm,
presenting at university because it was that researched
mm,
well. Um, there were some students, obviously, they did a common one, and you can compare the ones that have done the same topic
mm,
and the difference. But I think it's really good one them to kind of recognize very early on.
mm.
They're all understanding of synoptic links, and it goes down really well. You learn something about them, they learn something about one another. I don't necessarily put the box on the school internal system. It's
Yeah.
something I just give them a written feedback on.
Yeah.
Um,
Amazing.
yeah, and it's something that they get to keep, and they're surprised that I still remember it, or there's still a copy of
Yeah.
it. They kind of see the first thing that they've produced in the lesson. Um,
That's interesting because it really
yeah,
like it's a different way of doing. I also really love the idea of those captains or the idea of them sort of running the revision sessions as well because obviously it's getting the students to take ownership of those synoptic links as
yeah,
well, their own revisions of
and the,
so and
the
also it takes that
students,
away from
yeah,
you.
because we have to like depending. Our school works like this, depending on how many students you have. You can only select a certain number of students. So sociology tends to be small. So I had to pick one girl and boy for my captain, who I also say, if you're the captain, you are naturally the mentor as well. I had to pick
Mm,
four boys and girls to be mentors. So the bigger the subject, like psychology is always big in our school, so they would have
mm,
more. Sociology is small. And what I've done is I kind of looked at past exam questions, and I focused on like the big questions and what topic hasn't come up in the past couple of
mm,
years. And I've created workshops for each week. So we do it every Thursday, and we
mm,
kind of put together 10 workshops for this term before the mock
mm,
exams. So this week, two of my students are doing gender differences in achievement. Next week is childhood. The week after experiments.
mm,
Um, so they kind of lead it. And one of the tasks always in the workbook is a synoptic one. They do a classic one, key concepts, key sociologies. It's kind of very inspired by what you guys have done in the workbook, but they kind of like
mm,
either use that as a guideline or they make their own version of it. They create workbooks or PowerPoints and they kind of lead it.
mm.
Um, and I try to pick students that are of mixed ability. So those that are leading the sessions are not necessarily what they would typically say as high ability. I deliberately pick a mix
Yeah. Oh,
of
amazing.
students. Yeah,
It sounds like you've got lots of different strategies to incorporate those synoptic links, and it's not something you sort of leave either at the end of a topic or the end of the academic year. It's something that's threaded all the way through, and I think that's the key. I think the nature of synopticity that it has to be linked all the way through, but also those sort of common themes and recognising those
yeah,
common themes. And I think the importance, which I've got away from what you're talking, is it's all well and good you being aware of those common themes as a practitioner, as a teacher, but actually communicating that to the students and those synoptic links there, and then being fully aware of those themes so that they can either teach it like they do with the captains, or making sure that they're able to revise in an effective way. So there are lots of strategies there that I'm definitely borrowing some of those ideas. Particularly, I like the idea of the captains. That's something I'm going to
Yeah.
be using, and literally as soon as I
Our,
finish this call, those
our
students are going
school's
to find
very
out about
big on leadership and they're very
it.
inclusive. We have like STEM captains, there's subject captains for each A level
Mm,
subject, there's diversity captains, so we're very
mm,
big on diversity. You've got your careers one, and what I get students to do, I don't really pick because I don't believe in
mm,
teacher favoritism. I
mm,
get them to apply,
yeah,
and then I read their application form, and then I pick from the
mm,
best. And I think it's something that's really good for our school and it's really unique, and it's something those I've noticed those that are very involved in the revision sessions ends up really doing really well because they're
yeah,
revising
yeah. In order to
continuously.
teach it, yeah,
It's always
definitely.
fresh in their head.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I think synoptic links kind of teaches them that I need to be continuously revising
yeah, definitely,
and
100%.
building up my knowledge and application of that.
Yeah, definitely. Oh well, thank you for all your input and all your ideas. I appreciate that. I've personally taken away two, which I'm definitely going to action today. So thank you for sharing. And hopefully this will people who listen to that will take away some ideas as well. But definitely thank you for that, and thank you for your time. I appreciate you also teaching today and sort of squeeze that
Yeah,
into your working day. Thank you ever so much for your information and your honesty today. Thank you.
thank you. No worries.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you.